So here I am about 4 weeks after I did my initial video on the obesity code, and I just finished it yesterday. I had to put it down for a couple of weeks because my work schedule got kind of crazy, but as I said in that video, I wanted to revisit later in the book. I'm now finished, and I just really wanted to share some of the insights on it. I really would like a lot of people to read this book. I've found it to be incredibly transformational in terms of how I'm viewing my fitness and exercise and just nutrition overall. So I'm going to be a little tight with the details because I really would like people to read this book. There's a lot of stuff I read and it's like, oh, that's a nice little tidbit, but it's very rare that someone comes up with a concept that I just find kind of changes the way I view everything. And I think the biggest two things that I've come to learn from this is to stop focusing on calories. And I think he makes a very compelling case as to why calories don't drive weight loss and weight gain. I think the concept of understanding how your body reacts to different kinds of foods really has me changing how I look at things. I think that, and then I'd say just understanding chemically what's going on with my body and just understanding the concept of, I often hear the correlation between the amount of time you've been overweight and how long it often takes people who are obese long term, like myself, like I've been, how long it takes to lose weight. And I think he brings together a really concise framework for why that is the case. And I think what that's going to bring me is increased patience in this process. The one thing he comes to is how insulin drives weight loss and weight gain. Yeah, you said you were going to be quiet. Yeah. How insulin and insulin resistance drives weight loss and weight gain. And really having a framework for how that works, just understanding the term homeostasis is something I mentioned in the first video on the book. My body is fighting me on this, and he brings together a very detailed framework for why this is happening. My metabolism is slowing down. Every bite of food I take, my body is going to store more of it in terms of fat, the more I lose. I understand that he brings up there's a portion of the brain that he says acts like a thermostat, and you have a body set weight. And I always thought it was odd that over the last 15 years or so, my weight always kind of settled between 300 and 320. And I never really could put my finger on why that was the case. But I do understand that now. There is somewhat a body set weight, and it builds up through the years that I've maintained a poor diet. And my body is fighting to stay at that weight. And I understand this concept now. And I understand that it's not a function of cutting calories and these formulas that you see in terms of projected weight loss. I'll never look at one of those again. The diary tracker that I'm keeping has a projected weight loss and a time frame if you maintain a certain deficit of calories, and it never works. And I understand that now. My body is not static. My caloric usage is changing. My metabolism is changing. And I understand that my body is fighting me tooth and nail because it wants to stay somewhere in the ballpark of 300 to 320. And it's taken a long period of time to kind of set that body weight. And I really would like people to go in and read this book and understand how that process works and understand why this isn't a simple matter of, okay, I'm going to create a caloric deficit and the weight's going to fly off. That doesn't happen. And I now understand why. And I think those two items, he refers to it as the time-dependent nature of obesity, and he gives an explanation as to why someone who's been fit all their life and gains 15, 20 pounds can shed it in a couple of weeks. And someone like myself, who has spent the majority of the last 15 years, probably 80% of the last 15 years, somewhere between 290 and 320, how when I start to get away from that range, it gets harder and harder to lose weight. And so I understand that. I understand why. I understand how insulin drives the body set weight, and I understand how insulin resistance drives obesity. And I think these are things anyone who's struggling with their weight should really give a check on this book. It may not be for everyone. Everyone's not going to believe everything. And he goes into that, how there are so many competing theories on what drives weight and how everyone thinks they're correct. And I think what I really appreciated from him is he even says there is no one cause for obesity. It's driven by a number of different factors, and it varies greatly from person to person. Some people, it is insulin resistant. Some people, it's stress. Some people, it is they're just eating too much. And he says in certain cases, calories can drive it. But I think that the biggest changes I'm making are a push more towards whole foods, away from processed foods. Something I had already started last year when I listened to the course from the great courses on nutrition, and that was more of a conventional caloric deficit kind of framework for losing weight. This totally turns that on its head, but there are a lot of commonalities in terms of the types of foods you eat driving different resistance to weight loss. And he brings in the concept of the time-dependent nature of obesity and how it's not easily reversed. And I really appreciated that. Avoiding added sugars as much as possible, and understanding how that drives consistently high insulin levels, which drive obesity. And then I think one of the biggest things as well is something I'm actually about to finish in a couple of minutes, is fasting, and how this drives your insulin levels incredibly low, and this is what reverses insulin resistance. And I think he really ties that all together. Partially, I don't want to give everything away because I want people to read it. Partially because I don't think I could explain it nearly as well and as concisely as he did. This book is 12 hours long, and for me to try to regurgitate everything he says in a 10, 15, 20 minute, even an hour long video, even if I took 12 hours, I don't think I could explain it as well as he does. So I really encourage people to listen to this book, or I listen to it on Audible, read it if you're still the conventional page turner. I find Audible and going for walks very helpful. And I think this was an outstanding book, and I think this has really given me a new mindset. It's going to give me increased patience, and I also feel like it's really given me some tools moving forward that I think will be very helpful. This is not where my learning journey stops, but I think this will open up kind of a whole new area for me to research in terms of how to move forward with my weight loss. I actually ordered, Jason Fung is the author. I ordered his next book, and I'm about an hour into it. This one's only about 7 hours, and it's on fasting. And this is something I'm really going to look to incorporate more of. I've been intermittent fasting since late March, where I condense my window from approximately 12 to 8, but I'm a little flexible with it. I never eat after 10 p.m., but I never eat before 12 noon, and I try to get my dinner in by 7:30, 8 o'clock. But one of the things I've learned about this is be flexible, don't be so hardcore. And I think that helped me do what I'm about to finish now, which is my first 24-hour fast. It's a little under 24, but I'm trying to finish my dinner by 8 p.m. so I can get back. But I have not eaten since dinner last night. I finished at 9 p.m. This is the first time I've done this in my life, and I feel fine. I felt lightheaded for probably about 2 hours late in the afternoon, and he mentioned there would be some side effects and certain items that you'd notice in your body the first couple of times, but your body adapts as you do it more. So I'm going to finish this book on fasting, but I'm going to incorporate a 24-hour fast every Monday. I'm going to refrain from eating after dinner Sunday until dinner Monday night. So I'm going to end that fast in a couple minutes with some yogurt, and then I'm going to have some steak, couscous, and kale for dinner. And then I'm going to resume eating. I'm not going to try to make up these calories, but recognize that this isn't purely about trying to drop pounds. This is really about trying to fight the fight my insulin resistance that I've built up from a lifetime of eating processed food. So, I hope this is helpful. I'm definitely open to having a conversation with anyone, but I strongly encourage anyone and everyone who's battling with obesity like I have for the greater portion of the last 15 years to really give this a listen and see if there's some things you can incorporate and see if it can give you a new perspective on why things are happening the way they are and how this is actually happening to your body. So I'm going to end this segment here, but then I'm going to come right back and I'm going to do a Q&A with my wife. So I'm here with my wife. She's been watching me go through this process and she had some questions. So I told her I think it would be a cool idea if we just did a Q&A. I don't know what she's going to ask. So fire away, babe.
Okay, so thank you for the thorough, comprehensive review you did of the book and your takeaways from it. I think it is a good idea for us to read it as a family. Well, for me to read it.
It's my turn.
And try to figure out, how we can incorporate some of these things. So my ask of you is, what is the number one thing that you feel like we can incorporate as a family? Like if you had to say there was one thing that you wanted all of us to do, what would you think that would be?
I would definitely say a push more towards whole foods. You haven't struggled with obesity the way I have, so I don't think you'll have the same insulin resistance problems that I have. I don't think you'll have the same body set weight that I have, where you have to incorporate fasting. But I would definitely say a push towards whole foods because I understand better what this is doing chemically, and it is going to slowly change your body set weight over time. So I would definitely say a comprehensive review of the foods we're eating and just more of a push towards anything that's basic. They use the term nothing out of a package, but I just bought some bone broth that came in a package and it's organic grass-fed beef. But just basically a push away from processed food. Yeah, you said you were gonna be quiet.
Okay, I think that's a fair ask. I think that it's difficult and you have to be super intentional about not eating as much processed foods, and I have tried to cut down on the processed foods, particularly for Anaya and myself, but I know that I don't have the same level of focus on it for myself personally, because you're right, I haven't really struggled with weight challenges, but I do kind of recognize the disadvantages of processed food, just kind of how I was raised in eating in my household. Like it was like having anything with artificial flavorings or artificial added sugar, any of that kind of stuff was like a treat. It was definitely not part of what we ate like cooked dinner every night. So I'm trying as much as possible to do that for our family too. So another question I would have is, speaking on the childhood, is what do you think are some of the lingering effects from your childhood, maybe habits that you picked up as a kid that you still might struggle with today to kind of overcome?
I don't think any of my habits from childhood are lingering. I do think the impact of growing up on Kraft macaroni and cheese and that sort of stuff raised my insulin levels, or raised my insulin resistance, which leads to raised insulin levels. I think lack of knowledge is a big part of why I've struggled with this, because in pretty much all of my previous attempts in losing weight, I ate the same diet, I just ate less of it, and I didn't understand why it wasn't working. The conventional wisdom says it's simply a straightforward calculation of calories in versus calories out, and every 3,000 or so, 3,500 calories, every 3,500 calorie deficit you create is going to lead to a pound. Like, it's like a machine, and I understand why that doesn't work now. But I also recognize that my blood profile, I've developed probably a high level of insulin resistance, and I understand now that my body is fighting this. But I don't necessarily think it's any lingering habits. I think largely what I eat now is organic, but I was still eating a lot of processed food. I just cut diet soda out of my diet maybe 3-4 months, or whenever I recorded that video. I can count on my hand the number of diet sodas I've had since then. And I think it's just lack of information. And I think with this iteration and this attempt, I'm really making a drive to understand this better, to really understand the nutritional part. Two things I'm conscious of. One, I'm working out like a madman, but that's because I'm home and we just have all this a priority for me. It was a priority for me before the coronavirus hit, but this has just afforded me a lot of time. I'm not losing hours a day commuting, and I'm not in an office where I don't have access to, like, I work out now 3:30, 4 o'clock every day, and I can't do that in the office. So I recognize that, the fitness may drive some weight loss, but the diet has to be able to maintain it whenever I go back to a conventional schedule, and I can't afford to work out 2.5 hours a day. And I think I'm not very knowledgeable on diet, and that's something I'm really making a push to do this year. So I mean, it's kind of a long-winded answer, but I don't necessarily think, because I lived off of fast food in college, and anytime I could get some junk food when I was a kid, I would eat it. I don't really eat junk food, but I have had a huge portion of my diet be processed foods until recently, even now. And so I think that's more kind of what I'm changing now.
Okay. You mentioned a number of things that you're incorporating after reading this book. Fasting, eating more whole foods, eating less processed food, eating less food with added sugars. So is there any one thing that you feel you need to prioritize at the highest level, so that if when COVID is over and you start going back to work, or it's a busy time, that no matter what is happening, that's going to be something that you just are steadfast in saying, like, I'm going to do my fasting every Monday? Or is it something else?
I don't think there's any one thing. I just think prioritizing diet and recognizing that I can control my weight with diet alone, and not feeling like kind of losing I think making the disconnect between calories and weight is going to remove the thought that I can eat some junk food and then just go work out later. Something I did a decent amount last year, knowing, I'm going to go run 15, 16, 17 miles tomorrow. I can have this cheeseburger tonight, and just understanding that's not the case. I'm not going to get too militant and say I'm going to stick to basically my 2 cheat meals a week. And the book, he even says there are going to be times you go on vacation, there are going to be weddings, there are going to be times where your diet is going to be lax, but what matters is what you're doing over the long term. And I think just recognizing that diet, I understand more now why. I always think it's a cliche when I hear people say diet is everything, but I understand more now why that's the case, and how I can't necessarily just survive off of a bad diet and think I can work my way out of it with working out. I used to be able to do that when I was younger. The best shape I've ever been in my life was when I was in junior college, and my body fat was measured at like 7.7, 7.8. I had a 6-pack, and I lived in the dorms, and I ate cheeseburgers, fried chicken all the time, but I was 19, and I worked out probably 5-6 hours a day. I'm not working out 5-6 hours a day playing basketball and working out with a strength coach, and I'm not 19. So I just think diet more than anything. I don't think there's any one part of the diet. I think all these elements that I've mentioned are important, and then also just recognizing that I'm far from an expert and just continuing to learn. I'm committing to reading one book a quarter on nutrition moving forward. That's ongoing. There's no end date on that, and just continuing to learn.
So, with that in mind, knowing kind of what your body weight set is, what is your target weight if you have one now, and how do you have an idea of how long you think it might take you to get there based upon kind of some of the learnings that you have from the book now?
Well, one of the core things I've picked up from learning is do not set a timeline, because all that's going to lead to is disappointment. If I set a timeline and I don't make it, all it's going to lead to is discouragement, and it's going to likely lead me in the wrong direction. Mommy, daddy, almost done. So I throw out all timelines, and I'm just focused on consistency. In terms of weight, I'm really focused on getting in the ballpark of 220 to 225, and I haven't been that weight since I was at Genesee Community College in 1996 and changed percent body fat. But the weight is really more about BMI and just understanding the correlation between life longevity, heart disease. We often reject BMI, and people just say it's ridiculous. You'd have to be ridiculously thin. But the fact of the matter is, I was 225 pounds. I don't know that saying I'm definitely not thinking getting my body fat down to 7 and change is realistic again. But I'd like to be somewhere in the ballpark of 225. And that's more so based on BMI. And right now I'm 42 pounds from that. Got a very long way to go.
Who's at the door?
Well, if you're going to get down to that size, that means I'm going to have to lose weight, because you need to be at least 100 pounds more than me.
Okay, it's my turn.
Okay, last question. What's your question? Yeah. What you want to ask Daddy?
I said this morning.
What you said this morning?
Yeah.
You said, good morning, Daddy.
Morning, Daddy.
Anaya, what's your favorite breakfast?
Waffles and raspberries and blueberries.
Really? You eat raspberries and blueberries every morning, don't you?
Yeah.
What's your favorite fruit?
Strawberries and raspberries and blueberries.
And what's your favorite vegetable?
Broccoli and cheese.
You just told Uncle Paulie yesterday you ate broccoli. Okay, this video is getting excessively long, so I want you to wave bye-bye, yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.